The telecommunication sector has seen rapid growth more than any other sector over the last decade. According to the UN's International Telecommunications Union, investments in cell phones alone grew from $8.1 billion in 2005 to well over $70 billion today. To talk on the telecom sector and the increasing competition in that space, we're joined in studio by Peter Takaendesa, Telecoms and Technology Analyst at RMB Morgan Stanley. Hi, Peter.
It's good to be here.
Let's start with Telcom, which is that strange hybrid with a government interest in it.
Yeah.
If you add the government interest to the PIC interest, it's 50%, so that has an impact on its the shareholding. It's now being wooed by the Korean company, which made an offer and then reduced the offer. So where does Telcom sit here, and is this good for Telcom?
Look, if we look at Telcom over the past few years, there are a number of things that haven't gone well. Going out into Africa, Nigeria, sort of problems there, sort of exiting their investment in Vodacom and sort of re-entering the mobile market after, it has reached sort of very high penetration levels, relative to other parts of Africa. Then you look going forward, things changing, as fast as maybe they need to be, given that, the competitors are not waiting, they are not, they're going ahead, they're pushing ahead to take as much or to eat as much of Telcom's pie as possible.
Can Telcom ever catch up?
Yeah, look, I think they've started to sort of do the right things now. Why? Because they need help. Clearly, I think going for an international partner or a player who has got experience, particularly into the fixed mobile convergence space, is exactly what Telcom needs right now.
What kind of help? Do we imagine a whole lot of Koreans coming in, walking in and saying, right, we're going to do things differently around here? What does this mean?
Look, if you look at KT, they have quite a very strong franchise in Korea. They are number one in fixed, number two in mobile. And they have played very well in the sense of leveraging their fixed line network to, sort of drive smartphone penetration.
So there's similarities in other
into
words.
the market, that's right. So if you look at Telcom today, what are they trying to do is to follow exactly what KT has done, what KT started on 5 to 10 years ago.
Peter, when one looks at what Telcom has done and the expensive lessons from multi-links, etc., and we strip all that out, we look at the cash flow from the fixed line business, also the infrastructure investments they've made to date. Do you see a rapid increasing return on investments given the intellectual capital that KT will bring to bear? I can't see it happening in the next 12 months, but over the next 3 to 5 years, won't we see a substantial benefit?
Look, the Telcom's advantage, of course, definitely in the South African space is its fixed infrastructure. They have in excess of 144,000 kilometers of fiber. So the highway is largely okay. It's only that probably the off-ramps from that highway, they still need some work to be done. So can they get a return on that? I think it remains to be seen. If KT comes in and it's a success, yes, there is potential for that. What's taking away from the returns that you are looking out of, in Telcom right now has been all those things in Africa, the loss is out of there, and the mobile, of course, startup. And if you take out all those things, the returns are still quite reasonable.
It wasn't so long ago when Vodacom, when Vodacom, the shareholding was still there, and you looked at the share price and the market cap, and it was actually equivalent to the Vodacom value, that the market was actually valuing Telcom itself as zero.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I'd want to ask is, MTN was setting up a network in Sandton 2-3 years ago, of which to run a lot of their clients. They don't seem to have made the penetration which was anticipated. Do you think that will happen in the foreseeable future, or do you think Telcom will still have a stranglehold over that fixed line market?
Look, I think in all sort of profitable regions, high traffic sort of regions, the mobile operators, the alternative telcos will continue to push very hard there. Maybe what would be very difficult to sort of replicate or take away from Telcom is the smaller towns going into rural areas. That remains sort of an opportunity for Telcom if they can. I think one of the greatest opportunities that Telcom has is actually fixed broadband. If you look at South Africa, it's a big underperformer versus the regions we recently sort of completed a study on that, sort of looking at all the other areas. Even if you adjust for differences in population density, South Africa is still way, way underpenetrated at, about 5-6% household penetration by fixed broadband. You look at most markets like in Korea, they are closer to 100% household penetration now. So if they can get that right, I think there's still sort of an opportunity for Telecom to,
Let's look at some of the other players. Cell C, after battling for a long time, of course, Alan Not Craig there now, having come from Vodacom. You were saying earlier that Vodacom overpriced?
Well, I think Vodacom is overpriced at this point in time. Yes, they're paying an attractive dividend, but my preference remains MTN because there is the growth upside plus growth in dividends, very strong cash flows. They're not utilizing, they've got very good dividend cover. So they can still reduce that dividend cover, utilize that cash to pay out dividends because they certainly don't need much of that free cash flow for growth in places like Iran and North Africa.
Would you agree overpriced, Vodacom?
We're equal weight in both Vodacom and MTN at this stage because we think the challenges for both sort of, they match what we're seeing. Vodacom, it may look sort of overpriced, but that is a reflection of sort of a well-managed company. It's a reflection of sort of low risk in those dividend payments and balance sheet that is still under-geared. So it's not really over for Vodacom. I agree with you but that it's looking, if you compare sort of its rating versus sort of its historical, whatever trends or average, it's looking sort of towards the top end of that.
I mean, for Vodacom, the only reason for gearing is to get some semblance of financial leverage and to improve their returns on equity.
Yeah.
But effectively, it's a sunset business because Vodafone has blocked it into the rest of Africa, aside from Tanzania and a few other markets that it went into prior to the Vodafone transaction. So that concerns me most, is that the cash flow is dictated to by Vodafone and any strategies will be dictated as well.
What about MTN? I mean, they've got this flack in Turkey, they've got Iran. I mean, maybe this is just a function of a company getting very big and very successful, and occasionally it's going to take some pressure from disgruntled people who didn't get tenders. How do you see the pressure on it, and how's it going to get through?
Look, I think you're absolutely right. When you quite successful at times, people are looking at those profit margins and saying, wow, this is really good.
I want some of that.
I want some of that. Yeah, that's right. So I think it would not be easy. It's not easy for, some of those markets are quite difficult. But MTN, over the past few years, they've sort of, demonstrated quite very good capability in terms of handling that.
The growth? The point has been made about voice and data. Things are being used, the phones are being used to do all sorts of things but phone, including make tea. Some of them, they can do anything. So are these companies still a license to print money? They might be highly priced, but if you get into them, are they a license to print money?
That's exactly, I think, what we're looking at in Vodacom right now. We've been saying over the past few years that it's over for Vodacom. The market is saturated and all that, but it's still continuing to deliver despite that, simply because there are a number of things that are going very well. Data, we're still growing on average mid-20s, even after very aggressive tariff pressure on data side. So it's from a volumes point of view, we're still going well. So I think there's still that opportunity that is still there. South Africa, if you look at smartphone penetration, even data penetration, if you want, as a percentage of total revenues, we're still a bit sort of underpenetrated versus other markets. So there's still that opportunity, but I agree with you, net, if you compare the two, maybe the potential is still better longer term in MTN.
What about Cell C? I mean, Alan Not Craig, he had health issues, he had to slow down, and when one interviewed him, he actually visibly would be sitting still so as not to get stressed. Very intense man, the most successful individual arguably in that sector. Now he's got Cell C, which had underperformed. Is he going to spoil the party for the others?
Look, I think underestimating what Alan Not Craig sort of would do to this market would just be, I think, a big mistake. He understands the market very well. Some of the things that he started doing already, I think they are starting, to say to me, this market is going to change at some stage. Maybe those are some of the risks that if one is invested in this market, you have to keep monitoring very well. Yeah. We recently sort of completed a very interesting study looking at the Turkish market and the Kenyan market to see how the dominant operator was affected in those two markets. But our conclusion is that there are still, some barriers in this market that need to sort of wash through, including termination rates are still very high here compared to those markets. And as a result, our retail rates are also quite high. So it remains to be seen if Cell C can really get, to push those down.
And the switch rates, are they still high relative to?
They still.
You mean switching from one network to another, which of course you can do now because of portability?
Yes, no, that you
and
can
And also
do.
call switch rates.
That hasn't been a major sort of issue in our markets because you can simply get almost a free SIM card. So you can get another SIM card you want.
Final point, Peter, on this. My sense is that people, because it's been such a growth industry with new gadgets and everything, people have put up with some not very good service. For example, the phone can make you a cup of tea, but it drops your calls, and the pressure on them to improve the infrastructure. Surely there's going to be more pressure now as saturation point is reached in these different ways that the phones are used, more pressure for better service.
Yeah, that is the greatest challenge to all the wireless businesses there. It's not only South Africa, you look into the US and everywhere. It's quite a challenge because data traffic is continuing to grow ahead of revenues and everything. So it's a challenge for the mobile operators. They will definitely need more spectrum, and which is again sort of an unknown at this stage in the South African market. But what you're starting to see there is that a number of mobile operators that are preparing for the future, they are actually buying fixed line businesses such that they can offload the traffic from the mobile network to the fixed line network. So that's why I think again, what KT is seeing in Telecom, that over the long term, that's how things are going to go.